They control the cost of your dreams and the value of everything you've ever earned. Yet most people couldn't tell you who they really are. They don't campaign. They don't face elections. And still their decisions ripple through every wallet, every paycheck, every debt. These are the central banks, the silent engineers of modern life. They can summon wealth from nothing or erase it in a single meeting. When they whisper, markets move. When they act, nations tremble. But here's the strange part. They don't truly answer to the people they affect. Their authority isn't granted at the ballot box. It's built in boardrooms, wrapped in jargon, and protected by complexity. This is the hidden story of how central banks rose from wartime lenders to unelected architects of the global economy, and why understanding their power might change how you see money forever. To understand how the modern world was built, you have to start with a nation in debt. It's 1694. England has just crawled out of another brutal war with France. The crown is broke, the treasury empty, and creditors are losing patience. Then, in a quiet deal between power and profit, a small group of wealthy merchants steps forward with an offer that would change history. They would lend the government 1.2 million, an enormous sum at the time. In return, they asked for one privilege, the right to create a bank. Not a bank for farmers or shopkeepers, but a bank for kings. A place that could print paper money, backed not by gold, but by government debt. That arrangement gave birth to the Bank of England, the prototype of every central bank that followed. Its purpose was simple: fund the state and make a profit doing it. It didn't exist to stabilize the economy or protect citizens. It existed to keep the machine of government running, even when the public purse was dry. Over time, that idea spread. Across Europe, similar institutions emerged, privately owned, politically connected, and armed with the power to issue money. They became the quiet partners of empires, rescuing governments in crisis and in return gaining extraordinary influence. By the 19th century, they were more than banks. They were pillars of statecraft. Behind every war, every expansion, every economic boom, stood an invisible alliance between nations and their financiers. But across the Atlantic, a different story was brewing. One driven by suspicion, rebellion, and a deep mistrust of centralized power. Across the ocean, America had its own battle with money and power. And it wasn't pretty. From the moment the colonies won independence, Americans distrusted the idea of a central authority over finance. Twice they tried, and twice they tore it down. The first and second banks of the United States both collapsed under accusations of corruption, elitism, and favoritism toward the rich. For decades, the nation functioned without a central bank at all. Instead, private banks printed their own money. The result? Chaos. Competing currencies, wild speculation, boom and bust cycles that crushed ordinary people and enriched a few. Then came 1907, the panic that changed everything. Markets imploded, banks failed. The entire financial system teetered on collapse. In the absence of a central authority, one man stepped in to save it, financier J.P. Morgan, who used his personal network to coordinate a massive rescue. It worked, but it terrified Congress. One individual had just stabilized the economy better than the government itself. So, in 1913, a new law was passed, the Federal Reserve Act. It promised to create a system that would prevent crises, smooth out the economy, and protect ordinary citizens. On paper, it sounded perfect, a network of regional banks working together to maintain stability. In reality, it was something far more powerful. The Federal Reserve became the ultimate referee of money, controlling interest rates, the supply of credit, and the very flow of capital. Its decisions could lift industries or wipe out fortunes. But what most people didn't realize was that the Fed was designed with dual DNA, part public, part private. Its governors were appointed by politicians, but its regional banks were owned by private shareholders. It funded itself not through taxes, but through interest and fees from the financial system it regulated. That independence insulated it from politics, but it also shielded it from accountability. Decade after decade, its influence expanded quietly. Each crisis made it stronger, each bailout more necessary, and as the 20th century rolled into the 21st, the Federal Reserve and its global counterparts had transformed from cautious regulators into active architects of the world economy. Their tools were no longer limited to interest rates or lending. They now wielded quantitative easing, market interventions, and trillion-dollar balance sheets. The line between stabilizing markets and shaping them blurred completely. And behind the curtain, another question began to whisper louder. If central banks can create money at will, decide who gets saved and who doesn't, who are they really working for? By the early 2000s, the global economy was addicted to cheap money. Interest rates were low, debt was easy, and Wall Street built empires on sand, mortgage-backed securities, derivatives, and leveraged bets that few truly understood. When the illusion cracked in 2008, the crash was faster and deeper than anyone imagined. Panic spread like wildfire. Banks failed overnight. Families lost homes. Pensions evaporated. Millions of workers woke up to a future that had vanished. And when the smoke cleared, one institution stepped forward as savior: the Federal Reserve. With a few keystrokes, it created trillions of dollars that didn't exist the day before. The money flowed upward into failing investment banks, bloated corporations, and the same markets that caused the crisis. The rescue was sold as a necessity to save the system, and it did. But it didn't save the people living inside it. The markets recovered. The rich rebounded. Everyone else was told to be patient. That prosperity would trickle down. It never did. The decade that followed saw record profits for corporations and record inequality for citizens. Then came 2020, a crisis of an entirely different kind. The pandemic froze global trade, emptied cities, and sent stock markets into freefall. Once again, the Federal Reserve responded with the same weapon: unlimited liquidity. Within weeks, it injected over $3 trillion into the system. Corporate debt was bought, stock prices surged, billionaires doubled their wealth, while small businesses collapsed and millions lost their jobs. It wasn't just a bailout, it was a revelation. The curtain finally fell on the myth of neutrality. Central banks weren't just referees keeping the game fair, they were players, defending the system that empowered them, even as it left everyone else behind. And yet, the world applauded. Markets soared, confidence returned, and the illusion of strength was restored. But underneath that calm surface, something fundamental had changed. Money itself had become political, and trust in the financial system would never be the same again. When central banks change the cost of money, they change everything built upon it. They decide how easy it is to borrow, how safe it feels to save, and how wealth flows through society. They don't just guide economies, they shape realities. Look closer, and you'll see their fingerprints everywhere. The mortgage that defines your home, the student loan that lingers for decades, the savings account that quietly loses value as prices rise. All of it is connected to decisions made in rooms you'll never enter, by people you'll never vote for. Officially, central banks are independent. In practice, they serve the ecosystem that sustains them. The banks, the markets, the debt-driven structure of modern finance. Their independence shields them from politics, but it also shields them from consequence. And that's why understanding their role isn't just an economic lesson, it's a form of empowerment. Because the truth is, the system isn't built to set you free. It's built to keep you moving, to borrow, to spend, to chase a version of prosperity that keeps the engine turning. But when you recognize that pattern, you can begin to step outside it. You can choose assets that can't be printed. You can build income streams not tied to the next rate decision. You can learn, teach, and question, because financial education isn't about money, it's about freedom. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes with precision. Every boom, every crash, every promise of stability carries the same echo. The system must survive, even if people struggle within it. But survival isn't the same as progress, and stability isn't the same as justice. So when the next crisis hits, and it will, remember who the system protects and who it doesn't. Protect yourself first. Learn how money truly works, because the story of central banks isn't just about economics, it's about power. who holds it, and who decides what your labor is worth. If this changed how you see the world, share it. And if you want to dig deeper into the hidden forces shaping our history, subscribe, because understanding power is the first step to reclaiming it.